Okay, so the game that I am analyzing for this last analysis is called September the 12th, Atori World. So the game is located at the site listed here. It is a self-funded project created by newsgaming.com, which has a creative team of 6 people. This includes a lead designer, an art director, a programmer and designer, 2 animators and illustrators, a graphic designer, and a photographer/assistant. And I learned all of this via an email communication with Gonzalo Frasca, who happens to be the lead designer. He also stated in that email that the budget for this particular game was around $10,000, and it is distributed via the internet and requires the Macromedia Shockwave platform. The target audience for this particular game, I believe, is anyone that's interested in the war on terror, and particularly how the U.S. has responded to the terrorist acts such as September the 11th. While I don't envision elementary students playing this game, there is no reason they could not. I do believe, however, that the game is geared toward adults. I also think that the serious game goals are clearly stated on their website when they say, quote, "Our games are original because they are not meant just to entertain. Through this piece, we want to encourage players to think critically about the efficacy of the United States' current strategy against terrorism. Terrorism is a terrible problem, and we think it should be fought in a more intelligent way," end quote. So their serious game goals are pretty apparent through that statement. These same instructions will be seen in the video on the next screen, but I thought it important enough to take a moment and look at what the authors have to say about the rules of the game. As you see, they clearly state that, quote, "You can't win and you can't lose," end quote. Furthermore, they go on to state that, quote, "It has no ending, it has already begun," end quote. And then finally, I think their choice of words in describing the rules of the game are actually quite telling. The designers state, quote, "The rules are deadly simple. You can shoot or not," end quote. So I think that these instructions, like I said, are pretty telling in what they want to get across with this news game. So in just a second, I'm going to play this video, and this is my first attempt at actually playing the game. I'm not going to narrate the gameplay, as I really think it's important for you to listen to the game. So once the video is complete, I'll go ahead and break it down more in the following slides. So let me go ahead and go back. Let's see if I can start this game. So the cursor shows the targeting device, and at first when I started playing the game, I thought I was controlling like a sniper rifle, so I tried to target like a singular terrorist, but I soon discovered that that wasn't the case, as the first shot proves that I'm actually firing a missile and it's being launched into a crowd, and this of course causes civilian casualties. Once I realized I was firing missiles and not bullets, I then attempted to change my strategy and to target lone terrorists on the outskirts of town, as you can see the cursor pointing to here. But this also proved difficult because the buildings are often hiding innocents that you are unaware of. So even the shortest buildings, often there will be children behind those that you don't see. So once a missile is fired, you probably noticed in the video that you get this timer that begins, and that means that you cannot fire another shot. And I timed it, and it's approximately 18 seconds, give or take, that you are unable to fire any other missiles. You probably noticed that when innocents are killed, civilians who are close by come to mourn the deceased. This is the crying that you sometimes heard in the game, and you can see right here are the deceased, and here are the people who are mourning the deaths of these innocents. So the sound, that bleeping sound after the crying, indicates that the mourning civilians are now angry and taking up arms, as you can also see here. These are the civilians that were kneeling and crying, and now they're standing and they actually have rifles in their hands. These two here were also mourners who have already converted to terrorists. Soon, and before the player is allowed to fire another missile, the mourners have turned into these terrorists. As you can see now, they've all turned into terrorists. Once I could fire again, it only made sense to target the newly turned terrorist, right? Because there are an entire group of them. I assumed that by getting a shot off, I would be able to at least kill these terrorists. However, they immediately begin to disperse in all directions, as you can see here. They're running in all different directions, and I have already at this point, I believe, pushed the button to fire the next missile. Here you can see the shot that actually lands. I don't believe I succeeded in killing any terrorist with this particular shot. So by the time I decided to end my play session, there were many more terrorists than civilians. And as you can see, the town is beginning to look like one that's been devastated by war. I played the game. I mean, this was my first initial attempt at playing the game, but I tried playing the game several times. I tried playing different tactics. Nothing worked. If I took any shots whatsoever, pretty much all I succeeded in doing was creating more terrorists. So when considering the Ouroboros magic circle, I've moved the elements I feel are crucial to the success of the game to the middle. So first, the premise for the story is also tied to the relation the game has to real life and the context around which the game was designed. So as we all know, September the 11th is a day that will never be forgotten, and hence the title of the game, September the 12th, or what happened after that tragic day. I also believe that the simple mechanics of the game make it somewhat addictive. So, I tried playing the game, like I said, numerous times because it was so easy to play, and I kept trying different strategies to try and make it work. So because it's so easy to play, the player keeps trying. It is this conflict and challenge of the game, however, that are core to the player experience and the goals that the designer want the player to have. Regardless of how one feels about the War on Terror, this game will likely make them think about what exactly it is that we are doing. And I believe that was the ultimate designer goals for this game, as they stated earlier. So let's talk about fun. It doesn't exist. For me at least, there was no fun in playing this game, and I seriously doubt others will find any fun in this either. What the game does have, and plenty of it, is frustration. We're all aware that terrorism poses a major threat not just to our own nation, but to the world at large. When you first begin the game, you are determined to kill terrorists and only terrorists. but that is impossible. So before 5 minutes have passed, the frustration level is on the rise. If we again refer back to Ferrara in his statement that, quote, fun emerges from the experience when all of the elements, those elements being motivation, meaningful choices, balance, usability, and aesthetics, work well together, end quote, we soon see that most of these elements are missing in this particular game. At first, we are motivated to kill terrorists and free the world of fear. We soon realize, however, that the task is impossible. Next, there really are no meaningful choices in this game. Nothing you do will prevent the useless death of innocents, particularly children and animals. Third, at the risk of sounding redundant, there is also no balance in this game. Even if we manage to get a shot off that only kills terrorists, there is no reward for doing so. Those who have already been turned into terrorists don't suddenly turn back, so there's absolutely no reward in this game. The two things that the game does have is usability. It's a very easy game to play, and aesthetics. It's a pleasing game to look at. The colors are very vibrant, and it has that going for it. But these two things alone cannot constitute fun. So effectiveness. I believe that for the effectiveness of this particular game, it's the same thing that makes it not fun. So there is no winning, or for that matter, losing, as we're told in the very beginning of the game. The more that you play this game, the absolutely more frustrated you're going to get with it, because there's no strategy that will allow you to accomplish what it is you're after. And the more terrorists that are created, the more you think about what the war on terror really does mean. So it's for these reasons that the game is effective. So the gems of this game, I think the game definitely accomplishes what the designer set out to do, and it does so with simple mechanics or gameplay. And with only a budget of around $10,000, the game is aesthetically pleasing, and while that particular aspect is not always necessary, it's definitely a plus, and I think it's one of the things that can keep you engrossed in this particular game. As far as the anti-gems, I think while the game is successful in making the player think, it is extremely oversimplified. Also, the timer on the missile launcher makes it impossible to successfully target only terrorists, and for the other reasons that we stated earlier. And the game's portrayal of the war on terror is subjective, only showing one side of that war. In that sense, I think these kind of take away from the game, because after you've played it 2 or 3 times, you begin to realize that this is definitely a very subjective take on the war on terror. I think the takeaways for this is that the game is a good example of actually how news, or in this case a news game, can portray only one side of the story and be very subjective, instead of how we always think about news, which is that it should be objective and look at both sides of a story and report only the truth. So in that sense, I think the takeaway for this is that we always have to be aware with these type of news games that they do have a purpose, and that they're very subjective in the way that they're portrayed. So that's my take on the game September the 12th, A Toy Story. And here are the references for this particular game, and I hope that you actually went and tried playing the game prior to actually watching this.